The shelter hall smelled faintly of bleach and stale bread. A woman sat hunched, her shoulders shaking as tears slid onto her worn coat. She thought no one noticed, until engines roared to life in the distance, carrying a brotherhood about to turn her darkest night into a miracle. Before we start this story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Also, please subscribe to the channel. It will help us to bring you more inspiring stories every day. In the windswept town of Harbor Pointe, the safe haven shelter served as the last refuge for women escaping broken homes. On a frigid December night, Tessa Morrell, a single mother of two, sat quietly in the corner, her hands trembling as she whispered apologies to her sleeping children. She had fled a violent past with only a duffel bag and their favorite storybooks. Volunteers offered blankets and hot cocoa, but tonight her spirit collapsed. "I can't give them a future," she muttered, head buried in her palms. Nearby, Darius Holt, a broad-shouldered biker with weather-creased eyes, had just dropped off a box of canned food. He paused mid-stride, hearing the words cut through the thin air. Memories of his own mother's tears in a shelter years ago returned like a punch. Darius clenched his jaw. He knew despair when he heard it, and he wasn't about to walk away. Darius left quietly, but the sound of her broken voice echoed in his helmet as he started his Harley. He rode across Harbor Pointe, gravel spitting under his tires until he reached the warehouse where his brothers gathered. A dozen engines idled inside, chrome glinting beneath flickering lights. "There's a mother down at Safe Haven who thinks she's got nothing left," Darius said, pulling off his gloves. "We're not letting that stand." The men leaned forward, listening. They weren't rich, but they knew people. Shop owners, truckers, dock hands, townsfolk who still believed in pitching in when someone fell. Darius's voice hardened. 10 grand, by dawn. Not for us? For her kids?" Silence followed, then nods. Wallets were pulled out, phones dialed. They had pulled off rides across states. Raising money overnight was nothing compared to carrying a broken soul back to hope. The angels split into pairs, hitting every corner of Harbor Pointe through the night. At the 24-hour diner, the owner slid a wad of bills across the counter. "My mom raised me alone. Count me in." At the shipyard, dock workers passed a hat, cramming it with pay envelopes. Truckers at the gas stop chipped in, one grizzled man gripping Darius's arm. "Tell her she ain't alone out here." The bikers rode from one neon light to the next, saddlebags filling with crumpled bills and sealed envelopes. Some people hesitated, eyeing the leather vests nervously. But when Darius explained, "This is for a mother who thinks she's invisible," something shifted. Money found its way into their hands. By 3 a.m., their bikes sagged under the weight of generosity. Still, they pressed on, engines growling like a living promise. At dawn, the street outside Safe Haven shook under the arrival of nearly 90 Harleys. Residents peeked through curtains as the convoy parked with precision. Inside, Tessa stirred at the noise, confusion shadowing her face. The shelter director, Helen Ward, stepped to the door as Darius carried the first duffel bag in and unzipped it. Stacks of bills spilled onto the desk like a river. What is this?" Helen whispered. Darius's voice was calm but firm. "It's what your guests deserve. Hope." Tessa rose slowly, stunned, clutching her children's hands as biker after biker unloaded more. Her lips trembled. "Why would you do this for me?" Darius met her gaze evenly. "Because someone once did it for my mother. And because nobody deserves to cry alone." When the final count came, the shelter workers broke into tears. $10,327 in a single night. Tessa covered her mouth with both hands, overwhelmed. For weeks, she had believed she and her children were invisible, but now an army of strangers proved otherwise. One biker knelt in front of her son, handing him a toy fire truck. "Every hero needs wheels," he said with a grin. Another draped a quilt across her daughter's shoulders, whispering, "You're safe now, little one." Tessa collapsed into a chair, sobs pouring freely, not of despair, but release. Darius placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You didn't fail your kids. You fought for them by walking in here. All we did was light the way." Engines revved outside, their echoes a reminder. Harbor Pointe had just witnessed a miracle born from loyalty. News of the overnight fundraiser spread like wildfire. By mid-morning, Harbor Pointe's local radio announced, "Bikers raised $10,000 to save Shelter Mom." Callers phoned in, some in tears, others pledging to donate more. At the town square, the bakery put up a sign, "Half-price pies today. Proceeds to Safe Haven." The ripple effect grew faster than anyone expected. For years, Harbor Pointe had been a place where people kept to themselves, but the sight of leather vests carrying hope instead of fear flipped something inside the community. Tessa walked with her children down the block that afternoon, heads turning as strangers stopped to hug her, slipping folded bills into her hands. "You reminded us to care again," an elderly woman said, kissing her cheek. Tessa didn't know how to respond. She wasn't used to kindness this loud. But in her children's laughter, she heard proof that kindness was exactly what they needed. That evening, the angels returned to the shelter, not with money this time, but with labor. Darius barked orders like a foreman. "You paint. You fix the steps. 2 of you handle those busted lights." Within hours, Safe Haven hummed with activity. Rusted hinges were replaced, windows scrubbed, and the playground fence out back got a fresh coat of red paint. Tessa watched from the doorway as bikers balanced on ladders, their tattoos gleaming under work lights, joking with each other, as if repairing a shelter was no different than patching up a bike. One man repaired her son's torn shoe with duct tape, earning a giggle. Another braided her daughter's hair with surprising gentleness. "Why are they doing this?" Tessa whispered to Helen. The director smiled, eyes glistening. "Because sometimes the strongest men know exactly how to heal the most broken places." The transformation of Safe Haven didn't stop at repairs. Darius made calls to old friends, and by the weekend, trucks unloaded supplies, mattresses, blankets, boxes of food, even a new industrial coffee maker for weary staff. A local carpenter delivered bunk beds, whispering, "Put me on the list if you need anything else." By Sunday morning, the shelter looked reborn, no longer tired and forgotten, but bright, warm, alive. Tessa sat with her children in the newly painted common room, sunlight catching the colorful curtains a biker's wife had sewn. For the first time since fleeing her old life, she didn't feel like a burden. She felt like part of something bigger. "Mama," her son whispered, tugging her sleeve. "Are we safe now?" Tessa wrapped him in her arms, her voice breaking but sure. "Yes, sweetheart. We're safe, because people cared enough to make it so, but not everyone was impressed." A local councilman, long critical of the angels, muttered to reporters, "They're just trying to buy respect." Darius didn't flinch when he heard the remark. Instead, he called a town meeting. On Tuesday night, the community center overflowed with residents, shelter workers, and volunteers. Darius stood at the front, his heavy frame casting a shadow. "This isn't about patches or politics," he said, his voice gravelly but steady. "This is about people who've been forgotten. If we don't step up for them, who will?" A silence fell, then applause thundered, shaking the room. Even skeptics found themselves moved by the sheer authenticity in his words. And as Tessa stepped forward, tears glistening, and said, "They gave me back my life," the applause swelled into a standing ovation. For once, Harbor Pointe stood completely united. The momentum didn't stop there. Donations poured in from nearby towns after news channels picked up the story. Within 2 weeks, Safe Haven's bank account swelled with enough to fund new programs, job training, counseling, even an after-school club for kids. Tessa joined the program, learning bookkeeping skills she never thought she'd master. Each evening, she saw the angels ride by to check on progress, their engines humming reassurance. One night, her daughter pressed her face to the window. "Mama, they're like guardians." Tessa nodded, heart swelling. That's exactly what they are. For the first time in months, she began to picture a future not clouded by fear, but painted with possibility. And it all started the night her tears met the roar of Harley engines, and kindness answered back louder. Tessa's days slowly shifted from survival to rebuilding. With the shelter's new programs, she found part-time work at a local grocery, learning to balance ledgers in the back office. Each evening, she walked home with her children, their laughter chasing away shadows of fear. At night, she still cried sometimes, but now they were tears of release, not despair. The angels checked in often, never staying long, but always leaving something behind. Groceries, school supplies, even a second-hand laptop for Tessa's training. The children adored them, waving each time the Harleys thundered past. One evening, Darius handed her a small envelope. Inside was a prepaid rent slip for a modest apartment. "This isn't charity," he said quietly. "It's a fresh start." Tessa pressed the envelope to her chest, her voice shaking. "How do I ever repay you?" Darius's reply was simple. "By living, by showing your kids the fight was worth it." As spring bloomed, Harbor Pointe saw something remarkable. The shelter became more than a refuge. It became a hub of community life. Local teens volunteered to paint murals on the walls. Churches dropped off casseroles weekly. The angels even organized a charity ride, engines roaring across the countryside. Banners fluttering, "Ride for Hope." Crowds lined the streets, waving, some holding signs that read, "Thank you, Angels." That ride alone raised nearly $15,000, enough to secure Safe Haven's future for years. Tessa rode in the lead car, her children beside her, overwhelmed by the sea of support. As she waved to the cheering crowd, her daughter whispered, "Mama, they're cheering for us." For the first time, Tessa didn't just feel like a survivor. She felt like a symbol. She had gone from broken in a corner to leading a parade of hope. The transformation was almost too much to grasp. But healing wasn't just financial. It was personal. One night, sitting across from Darius at the shelter's picnic tables, Tessa finally shared pieces of her story. Her voice shook as she described the years of fear, the nights she hid bruises, the mornings she lied to her kids that everything was fine. Darius didn't interrupt. He listened, his weathered face unreadable, until she finished with trembling hands pressed to her lap. Then he spoke, low but firm. "You didn't fail. You survived, and survival is the hardest thing to do." His words landed heavy, but also freeing. For the first time, Tessa realized she didn't have to carry shame. What happened to her wasn't weakness. It was proof of her strength. She lifted her chin higher that night, her eyes clearer, her spirit steadier. The kids thrived, too. At school, Tessa's son joined the baseball team, proudly using a glove one of the angels had given him. Her daughter took to drawing, filling pages with colorful sketches of motorcycles and smiling faces. Teachers called Tessa in for meetings, not to scold, but to praise. "Your children are blossoming," one said warmly. Tessa left those meetings with tears in her eyes, grateful beyond words. One Saturday, the angels surprised the family with a trip to the county fair. The children squealed as they rode the carousel, bikers standing guard at every corner like gentle giants. Tessa stood in the crowd, clutching a lemonade, overwhelmed by the surreal truth. Her children weren't growing up in fear anymore. They were growing up in love, in laughter, in safety, and for her, that was the greatest gift of all. By summer, the town's view of the angels had completely shifted. Where once there had been suspicion, now there was respect. Shopkeepers waved, kids ran to fences when they passed, and even the councilman who once criticized them quietly donated to Safe Haven's next fundraiser. Tessa, once hidden in the shelter's shadows, now stood proudly at its front desk, greeting newcomers. "You're safe here," she'd say, her voice steady because she meant it. The angels didn't hover. They came when needed, then rode on, leaving echoes of thunder and hope. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Darius left a small patch on the shelter's bulletin board. It read, "Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the ones who show up." Tessa traced the letters, her chest tightening. She realized that was exactly what they had given her, a family when she thought she had none. One humid July evening, Safe Haven hosted a community dinner to thank everyone who had given. Folding tables stretched down the street, draped in mismatched tablecloths. Children darted between chairs with sticky hands, laughter filling the air. Tessa stood near the entrance, greeting guests with a smile that reached her eyes. When Darius arrived, she froze, emotion catching in her throat. He had been the spark, the one who refused to let her despair remain unanswered. She stepped forward, pressing a plate of food into his hands. "This time I get to serve you," she said softly. He chuckled, taking the plate, but the gleam in his eyes betrayed how much it meant. For the first time, she wasn't the one being rescued. She was a host, a giver, part of the backbone of Harbor Pointe. Later that night, Tessa addressed the crowd. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied as she spoke. "Months ago, I came here broken. I thought I had nothing left to give. But the people in this town and these men you once feared showed me I was wrong. You didn't just save me, you gave me a future." The crowd erupted in applause, some rising to their feet. Darius leaned against his Harley, pride glinting in his eyes. For the first time since joining the club, he felt the road had carried him exactly where he needed to be. The angels revved their engines in salute, the roar vibrating through the night sky. And as Tessa's children waved from the front row, it felt less like a fundraiser and more like a family reunion. The months that followed cemented Tessa's transformation. She moved into her own small apartment, its walls lined with the children's drawings and thrift store furniture. At work, she earned a permanent role managing accounts, her boss praising her sharp eye. On weekends, she volunteered back at Safe Haven, guiding new women who walked in with the same haunted look she once wore. "It gets better," she told them with conviction. And they believed her. One Saturday morning, as she packed lunches for shelter kids, the rumble of Harleys filled the street again. Darius stopped at the curb, lifting 2 fingers in a casual salute. Tessa smiled, waving back. No words were needed. They both knew the bond forged that night would never break. By the end of the year, Harbor Pointe held its first Ride for Shelter event. Hundreds of bikes lined the main highway, chrome gleaming like a river of steel. Families lined sidewalks, waving flags and cheering. Tessa rode in the lead car with her children, banners fluttering. "Hope has wheels." As the convoy rolled past, her son leaned out the window, grinning. "Mama, they're riding for us." She kissed his cheek, whispering, "They're riding for everyone who needs a second chance." The event raised enough to expand Safe Haven into a larger building, ensuring no woman or child would ever be turned away again. And though money was counted and tallies made, the true wealth lay in the sight of an entire town riding together for compassion. On a cool autumn evening, Tessa tucked her children into bed, their laughter still echoing from the day's parade. She stepped onto the balcony, the night air crisp. In the distance, faint but unmistakable, came the rumble of engines heading out of town. She closed her eyes, whispering, "Thank you." For once, it wasn't a plea. It was gratitude. The angels hadn't just raised money. They had raised her spirit, rebuilt her strength, and given her children a future anchored in hope. As the sound of Harleys faded into the night, Tessa pressed her hands to the railing, smiling through quiet tears. No longer broken, no longer invisible, she was alive, strong, and free. And in Harbor Pointe, The legend of the night, the angels answered, a mother's tears would never be forgotten. From tears in the shadows to a town rising in unity, Tessa's story shows the power of loyalty and kindness. If this story touched you, subscribe, like, and tap the bell, so you never miss another tale of resilience, redemption, and the roar of unexpected brotherhood.